Hello, I welcome you all to class 8th now. We are done with class 6th and 7th. And class 8th, Pol Science NCERT starts with Indian Constitution and it talks about secularism. So let us now start with the book itself. Uh, Here we are. This is what the class 8th first chapter is about. It talks about unit 1 says the Indian Constitution and secularism. So very interesting topic here. Now, before some factoids are given, which will come which are very useful for exam point of view. They are often asked in MCQs in preliminary. In 34, Indian National Congress made a demand for Constituent Assembly. Now, there was a guy called M.N. Roy, Madhavendra Narayan Roy, who for the first time advocated that India needs a Constituent Assembly. Now, who was Madhavendra Roy? What were his beliefs? How did he transform his belief? This is beyond the scope of current discussion. This is something in our optional that we'll see when we will study Karl Marx in great details. So in December 46, all these are history stuff. Constituent Assembly was formed between 46 December to November 49. This is the time zone during which the Constituent Assembly drafted the Indian Constitution. So today, most of the countries have constitution. This is one of the meetings of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru addressing the Constituent Assembly. So when the constitution making process was almost done, then the first Prime Minister was addressing the Constituent Assembly. This is when this picture was taken from. So all democratic countries are likely to have constitution. It is not necessary that all countries that have constitution are democratic. Yes, China might have a constitution, but that will not make China democratic. So, what is the purpose of the constitution and how inevitably it is linked with the democracy? These are some of the questions that we need to find answers to. So, what is the need? If I ask you what is the need, constitution tells us what the fundamental nature of our society is. And you see, a country is made up of different chunk of people, different communities of people who share certain beliefs but may not necessarily agree on issues. Constitution helps serve as a set of rules and principles that all person living in a country see. Uh, we all agree to this that India is a land of diversity, so much of heterogeneity, so much of versatility that things differ from one place to the other. Uh, Linguistic diversity, I'm not very fluent in the language that you speak, not very fluent, that would be an alien language to me. If you start talking in your native tongue, I'm sure you understand Hindi, but then your proficiency in Hindi cannot be at par with my proficiency in Hindi, right? So this is linguistic diversity. And forget someone in Hyderabad and someone in Delhi. The Hindi in Delhi is different from the Hindi in Bihar. The Hindi in Bihar is different from the Hindi in Rajasthan. That is indeed different from the Hindi in Haryana and in Hyderabad then. Okay, so you see one language being, uh, they are speaking this language differently in different places. The regional, what do you call, mother tongue influence comes into play. So it is a land of diversity. Even similar things sound very dissimilar. I'm talking about one language. Then there are so many food choices, and we have talked about these things earlier also. So, what is the bare minimum that we all must agree to, despite all those differences, is what the Indian Constitution tells us. Set of rules and principles that all persons in a country can agree upon. It gives us a minimum common stuff. Now, they have given the story of Nepal. No need to go into that for the moment. Purpose of constitution is to define the nature of country's political system. Now, Nepal was a monarchy. The royal family was killed. Some say it was at the behest of China. However, we don't have any credible proof of that, so we will not write it anywhere in the exam. So the entire royal family was killed. Monarchy was gone, and now there were attempts to make Nepal a democratic country. They have attempted to write their constitution at least half a dozen times. Constitutional experts from India went there to guide them, but still they have not arrived at a mutually agreeable constitution till date. So see how a form of government was replaced by another form of government, and it is still having some form of instability or the other. So, what does the government constitution tells us? That which form we have adopted a democratic form, parliamentary form. America is a democratic country with a presidential form. So Nepal was having a monarchy. Now it is trying its luck with democracy. So these are the different things which the constitution tells us. Now, constitution often lays down rules that guard against the misuse of authority by our political leader. I'll tell you how. A parliamentary form of government says in India, as per the constitution, that whichever party has the required numbers. When I say required number, I'm talking about the Lok Sabha, the lower house of the people. 272. There are currently 543 seats in Lok Sabha. Two seats that were given to Anglo Indians, they were nominated. It has been done away. There is no such provision now. So it was 543 plus two Anglo Indians. Please remember, very recently, not even a year, it has been scrapped. So currently there are 543 seats, and if any party gets 272 seat, then the party can form government. Currently, the ruling party BJP has 303 seats. In fact, Modi ji is the only person who got majority on his own after 30 years. The last time anyone breached 272 mark was Rajiv Gandhi ji. Now, Indira ji was killed, and there was a huge sympathy wave in entire India. Rajiv Gandhi won the highest number of seats in India ever, 400 plus MPs in Lok Sabha. After that, Congress could not touch 272 ever till date. So it was only after 84, after the assassination of Indira Gandhi, when Mr. Rajiv Gandhi ji won majority on his own, breached the 272 mark, that in 2014, Modi ji got 282 seats, 10 more than what was required. 2019, he gets 303, even more than what he got in 2014. So this is the numerical game. Whosoever has 272 or more seats in the Lok Sabha, that is the lower house where elections are held, he or she will form the government. His or her party will form the government. So currently it's BJP under Mr. Modi ji. So what if after getting all such powers, they start acting arbitrary? What if government says that, what if Modi ji say that there will be no elections? I'll remain the prime minister as long as I am alive. Many people were alleging this. The chief minister of Delhi was particularly saying that if he wins again, there will be no elections. So what if Modi ji decides that yes, you all were right. Anyhow, I am only winning, so let there be no election, and I'll remain the prime minister. He cannot do that because the constitution does not allow him to do that. Read this line. Often lays down rules that guard against the misuse of authority by our political leaders. There are checks on even the prime minister, on even the ruling party by the Constitution of India. Okay, so again, it controls the government. Constitution controls the elected government. It also ensures that a dominant group does not use its power against other less powerful groups. Uh, like a dominant group has voted and elected a government. It can be true at the national level, it can be true at a regional level, at a state level. And what if government that has been elected because of the vote from a dominant group, it can be any dominant group on the basis of religion, caste, language, anyone, ethnicity. There are several such dominant groups in India, and they start, subjugating the less dominant people, because we are the one who have elected this government. So this government will not do anything to us. So we will subjugate the other group who are not so influential. Now this is where the constitution comes into play. Constitution will ensure that no such thing happens. It will protect the less dominant from the more dominant. Constitution usually contains rules that ensures that minorities are not excluded from anything that is routinely available to the majority. Now, minority has been defined by the Indian Constitution in two ways. First one is the religious minority. Second one is the linguistic minority. I would be a linguistic minority when I come to Hyderabad because I do not know your language. I don't know Telugu. If you come to Delhi, maybe, yes, you will be a linguistic minority because Delhi first language is Hindi. you are not so proficient in Hindi. If we go to Punjab, Punjabi is the language, so you and me both will become linguistic minority over there. Religious minority, everyone other than Hindu is a religious minority in India. Hindu has been accorded the uh, this status of majority. However, having said this, there are certain states in India where Hindus are in minority. Kashmir, Kashmir is no longer a state, but even when it was a state, Hindus were in minority. There are several states in Northeast, Nagaland, uh, Manipur, where Hindus are in minority, but Hindus are not accorded minority status. So someone filed a PIL in Supreme Court saying that when others are attributed minority status, why are we denied of it, where we are in minority? Supreme Court did not entertain it. Supreme Court scrapped it, did not hear it. This happened last year. So this is the current status. Maybe tomorrow someone will again file a PIL, and if court does not do anything, maybe government will do. But currently, Hindus are the majority, and other religious followers are minority in India, depending on their numerical strength. So, and it says that minorities are not excluded from any, which means that they are not denied what rightfully belongs to them. So it is this can refer to one community dominating other. This should not happen. That is why it has this provision has been made that religious minorities and linguistic minorities have some provisions that favor them. Third thing is to save us from ourselves. Now, this might sound very strange. That is written here, and they have given a very beautiful example. Uh, I'm not sure, but when I was in college, I used to hear these things that every politician is corrupt. All parties are neck deep in corruption. No one cares for us. India needs a military dictatorship. India needs a dictator to put our house in order. It was like replacing one set of problem with the other. However good it sounded at that time, today I realized that it was like replacing, you are trying to solve a problem by creating a bigger problem. Okay, so this is what it was suggested. And you see here what it is given, that it is possible that many people who live in democracy might come to strongly feel that party politics has become so acrimonious that we need a strong leader to set this right. Swept by this emotion, they may not realize that in the long run, dictatorial rules goes against all their interest. Very important, right? Dictatorial rules goes against all their interest. This is what Germans realized. This is what Italians realized when they were bleeding in the Second World War, when fascism and Nazism came to Italy and Germany. In India, you hear the cries, these occasional cries that fascism is rising in India under the current government. And we have to deal with this topic in optional. However, I'll give you in political science optional, there is one full chapter on fascism. I'll give you just 1 minute out of it right now because we are dealing with it in the NCERT. Some context is here. There is a litmus test for fascism. Fascism means that there is one person who is taking all the calls. There is no opposition. There is no court to hear the redressal of your grievance. There is no independent media that can criticize the government's move. The buck stops at him. He is the alpha. He is the omega. He is the beginning. He is the end. He or she, whoever is the ruler, like King Jong-un in North Korea, like Xi Jinping in China. So there is a litmus test for fascism. If you can publicly call your government fascist and get away with it, your government is not a fascist. We need to learn from history that fascists do not allow us to shout every day that we are living under fascist. Had your government been fascist, you would have been silenced by the state or landed up in life imprisonment. So this is one of its kind of fascism if you can cry day in and out and still get away with it. So India is a very deeply committed to democracy, and this is what we are seeing here. Now let us move ahead. Good constitution does not allow these whims to change its basic structure. Now this basic structure is a doctrine actually that came in 1973, 24th of April, after the Keshwaran Bharti case that we will deal later. And these whims, like India needs a dictator, no. Just because you feel it for the moment, you cannot compromise the fate of India because of what you feel. Now, next thing is here. What are the key features of the Indian Constitution? And let us see these key features. These are very subtle commentaries on what has happened and how it has shaped. First one is the federalism. What is federalism? There is a two layer of government, two levels of government. One in the state, the other in Delhi at the center. Comes democratic decentralization, the 73rd and 74th Amendment, and we have Panchayati Raj and urban local bodies, the municipalities and PRIs, Panchayati Raj institutions. So you see, federalism is going deep. One level, two level, three level after 73rd and 74th Amendment. Two-tier government, now it is a three-tier government because you have a federal structure. Now, India is often referred as Federa Sua Generi. Now, this term is used by, was used by, he is no longer with us, Grenville Austin. He was an American, but he was a scholar on Indian Constitution. So he called Indian Constitution, Constitution as Federa Sua Generi. Sua Generi means of its own type, because it has neither complete features of federalism nor of unitary form of government. America is a true federal country, okay, because there people have dual citizenship. They are citizens of USA, then they are citizens of California, Caroline, Virginia, Washington, so on and so forth. You are not a citizen of Hyderabad, I am not a citizen of Delhi. Both of us are citizen of India. We don't have dual citizenship. So this type of federalism is only found in India. That is why it is sua generi, of its own type. Now, next is parliamentary form of government. See, Britain was having a parliamentary form of government. Britain still has a parliamentary form of government. So we were used to working on this form of government even before independence. There were provincial assemblies elections that were held under the British Raj, where several Indians could fight and win elections and sit in the provincial assemblies. You know, when Bhagat Singh was planning to throw a bomb in Central Assembly, he was concerned that even Indians would be sitting there because some of our people have won the election and they are there. So then he said, no, we are not there to kill anyone. We'll just throw it on empty benches so that noise is made. We are arrested. We'll go to court. We will give our testimony, and that will convey our message to the masses, is what Bhagat Singh's plan was. Having said this, the idea here is that I want to convey you that even Indians were sitting in the legislature. So they got a first-hand experience of how parliamentary form of government works. And Bhagat Singh was hanged in 1931, which means the incidents that I'm talking about is late 1920s event. Till 1928, 29 to 1947, good 20 years of experience working with parliamentary form of government. So it was tried and tested. That is why we subscribed to it, because we had having some expertise, if not all, then some expertise and some experience about parliamentary form of government under the English. Third is separation of power. Now, just listen, don't read, or you can read this. There is just one paragraph. I don't know how to explain these lines, but I'll explain you what it actually means. Separation of power means England is functioning on parliamentary supremacy, which means England Parliament has two houses, House of Lords and House of Commons. So when they say anything, whenever they make a law, the Supreme Court of England cannot do anything about it. Parliament is supreme in England. In USA, Supreme Court is known as Federal Court. So when they pass a judgment, the President of USA, the Congress cannot do, the Parliament there is called Congress, cannot do anything about it. Because they have judicial supremacy. England has parliamentary supremacy. India has constitutional supremacy. Because all the three organs, legislative, executive, judiciary, the three of them derive their power from the constitution. And three of them keep checks and balances on each other. We cannot say judiciary is supreme. We cannot say executive is supreme or legislative. Three of them keep check and balance on each other. So how do they keep check and balance is what we'll study later on. First, there is a separation of power. Parliament will make law, executive will frame policies and implement those laws, judiciary will do justice and see whether any law that has been made by the executive and legislature violates constitution or not. So their domains are very specifically demarcated. No one should encroach into the other domain. That is what is known as separation of power. fundamental rights. We all have fundamental rights. There are 6 fundamental rights that have been guaranteed to all Indian citizens from Article 12 to Article 35 in Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. Please remember that it starts from Article 12 and it ends at Article 35, Part 3. So what does this fundamental right ensure? What do they ensure? They ensure that they protect citizen against the arbitrary and absolute exercise of power by the state. What is arbitrary? State can do whatever it wish. That is called arbitrary. Absolute, there is no limit. State cannot come to my house tomorrow morning and tell me that Mr. Kanish, we are arresting you. I'll say, what for? Same thing applies to all of us. State cannot barge into our places and just, kill us or arrest us or deprive of us of our fundamental right. There has to be a suitable reason for that. There has to be a law in place. So arbitrary actions are prohibited because we all have fundamental rights that have been guaranteed by the Constitution. These fundamental rights can be compromised. These fundamental rights can be limited by the state if we are eligible for that. If we do certain wrong things, if a terrorist starts shooting people, government can well shoot him down and deprive him of Article 21 right to life. Not to me and you, because we are not engaging in terrorist activities. So until there is a situation created by my or your action that allows government, that calls government to compromise our fundamental right, government shall not do that. They cannot do that arbitrarily. There has to be a situation. Okay, arbitrary means doing whatever comes to your mind, whether right or wrong. So these are the fundamental right provision. Now, what else feature is given here? Secularism. Now, one of the most discussed, interpreted, misinterpreted, and reinterpreted term in the Indian politics. Secularism officially means that state shall have no official religion. Now, I'll try to tell you something more about it. Indian secularism differs from Western secularism. When you will read modern world history in your paper one, you will realize that medieval Europe was severely under the clutches of church. Religion was dominant and church was status quoist. Church did not like anything new happening because why do people fear anything new? Because they are scared that their privileged position will be compromised. I'm having certain advantage, and if something new emerges, my advantage will be gone. That is why I'll be scared that no, this thing should not happen. So this is how insecure church was in medieval Europe. Now, it took someone like Napoleon Bonaparte at the end of French Revolution to dismantle the Roman Empire and keep church within its limit. Okay, so Western secularism calls for a strict separation of religion and state. Religion is different, state is different. They have a separate domain because they have suffered because of religion. We were not at war with religion, we were at war with imperialism. We were under British, we were not under any religious domain. So our secularism is different. It says the state will not promote any religion, nor abhor any religion. The official word that is used in the constitution is Sarva Dharma Sambhav. It's a Sanskritized Hindi word. It means equal proximity to all religions. When I say proximity, it means distance, equidistance from all religion. State will not promote one religion at the cost of other. State shall have no official religion. There are 53 Islamic countries. There is one Jewish country, Israel. There are Christian countries. There is no Hindu Rashtra. Nepal was a Hindu Rashtra. Now I told you what happened there. So India is neither a Hindu Rashtra, nor an Islamic state, nor a Christian theological state. I'm strictly talking in terms of theology. We will discuss these things more in option paper. So secularism simply tells us that state is having no official religion and it will keep equal distance from all religions and it will interfere if and when needed. Western secularism will not do that because as I told you, separate domains in West. Religion is different, state is different. But here the state will interfere. So Sati, you all are aware of what is Sati Pratha? It was considered pious some 200, 300 years ago. Today it's a criminal offense. When was the last time you heard about a sati? You will have to Google it because we don't hear these cases. Triple talaq, state will interfere. If a woman is meeting the fate of triple talaq, that is against right to life and dignity. So the state will interfere there. You know, when triple talaq case was being heard in the Supreme Court, it was a 3 judges bench, and the Attorney General of India, Attorney General is the advocate of Government of India. He was arguing on behalf of Government of India. The bench, the 3 judges bench said that we will examine whether triple talaq violates Quran or not. The Attorney General rose up and said, he stood up and said, Your Lordship, that is not your job. You are not here to interpret Quran, you are here to interpret Constitution. So leave aside whether it violates Quran or not, but please make sure it violates Constitution or not. And if it does, then scrap it up. Which means India is not governed by any religious text, but by the Constitution of India. So religion, state will interfere if and when it is needed. That is what Indian secularism is. There is more to it, a lot more to it, not here. So these are the things that we have discussed here. I hope you are understanding these things. Just give a casual reading of this chapter, and please, if you have any issues, then listen to this video. I think this will be more than enough. So bye for now, and we are regularly meeting each other. So please just revise everything. Happy studying.